Hey everyone, and welcome to the Real Birding Podcast, the show where we crack open the world of birding and talk about our own birding adventures. I'm Will, coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Caleb in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And we thought it'd be fun to start off the show a little differently today. We are going to introduce what we would like to call Bird Quiz. We are going to play the song of a North American bird, and we would like for you to figure out what that bird is. And when you think you know, drop the name in the comments, no matter where you're watching. We are going to select a random winner with a correct answer, and we're going to give them a shout out at the beginning of next week's show. So without further ado, let's play it. All right. If you think you know what that North American bird is, let us know in the comments. Lots to get into this week.
Only one repeat, eh? We're going to make it nice and hard for people.
Let's get into it. Caleb Putnam, how are we doing, friend?
I'm doing great. I'm a little sunburnt, but I got home late last night from Texas, 2 weeks, and I'm happy to be back. And it just warmed up to like 75 degrees, so apparently I brought the weather with me.
I love Texas, and more importantly, I love birding Texas. And 2 weeks there, that's enough time. Last year, I spent about 6 weeks in Texas because I was doing some work there, and I think in the end, I saw about 220 species in that time. So this awesome biodiversity.
That's amazing. I mean, it really comes down to California and Texas. Those are the two states that have the most species. And, you know, the habitats are just full of birds down there. I think even in the wintertime, one of the big take-home messages, we are so accustomed in the north to having large periods of the year where the habitats just don't have that many birds present. And it's just not that way down there. Like it's just very, very birdy. And to be fair, it is becoming in the early phase of spring migration, so there are new birds around. But you just get the sense that any kind of cover will have birds in it down there. It's so fun, man.
What I like about it is in the span of about a day, you can go from like central Great Plains to desert to the Texas Hill Country, which you were just in, to the Gulf Coast, where you've got these shorebird sanctuaries where there are just tens of thousands of shorebirds and dozens of species. It's really quite variable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's very diverse. And then small changes in the orthography or the vegetation occur in a certain area, and then like Pyrrhuloxias are there, and then they're not there. And there's all these like little things, and like Couch's kingbirds apparently stay in San Antonio all winter, even though they're an insectivore, and a lot of the other insectivore flycatchers leave for the winter. So it's very, very interesting. It's the patterns that are occurring for birds down there are really genuinely different than what we have up here. And then the other big thing is there's so many species of our neotropical migrants, warblers and things. Many of those will not cross the Gulf when they're coming north or south. They're trans-Gulf, so that forces them to go through Texas. And so if you're in that thin strip from San Antonio to the Texas coast, you have an extraordinary concentration of birds each spring and fall. Things like mourning warbler, kind of an uncommon migrant most places, really, really common. It's one of the most common warbler migrants. They weren't in when I was there, but talking to my ornithology friends down there and whatnot, it's just it's a very different flavor than what we get in other areas of the country, and always so fun. Just so much going on.
Yeah, and the near Texas endemics, or at least the breeding endemics, like black-capped vireo and golden-cheeked warbler, which I assume we're going to talk about a little bit later.
It might happen.
It's just unbelievable. And parts of the state feel like the Midwest. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm near Dallas, I look around, it's like it's not that different. There's live oaks, and then you get out west and it's like am I like in northern Africa? It's like
yeah. Mediterranean, almost like shrubby, kind of dry, blue skies all the time. And then it's also because I was in Waco, and then Austin, and then San Antonio. And so these are areas where there's a little bit of the east and a little bit of the west at the same time. So like the hummingbirds had just arrived about a week prior to me getting there. And I'm like, well, wait a second, is this going to be ruby-throateds, the eastern one, or is it going to be black-chinned, the counterpart from the west? And the answer was both. We had both.
And they're pretty darn hard to tell apart unless you get a pretty good look.
Very difficult. If it's an adult male with the throat, with the gorget, you just have to wait long enough to see what color it is, and then it's easy. But yeah, all the other ones are really, really hard. One little thing that I had either forgotten about or didn't realize: black chins wings make a little noise. They make a little buzz in flight, and ruby-throateds do not do this. It's not like a musical wing whir like broad-tailed or rufous, where it's really loud and kind of chimey and sounds like George Jetson mobile flying around. It's not like that, but it's buzzy like an insect or something, especially the adult males.
So the sounds that we hear when a ruby-throated hummingbird flies by, the little chittering, is that like a vocal thing? That's not wing.
Yeah, I think it's vocal, exactly. But with the black chins, and I'm getting this from the guys that I was birding with down there. Even the female and juvenile black chins have a little bit of this sound. So I had not known that. So apparently,
so that's actually.
I was just saying, like it's actually a field mark you could use, if you don't see, because a lot of the hummingbirds, you hear it, but you never see it. And if it's making an insect like wing whir, it's going to be a black chin, not a ruby-throated. That was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, in Charlotte, we get so many more vagrant hummingbirds than you guys get up in Michigan. Rufous hummingbirds at a scale that's kind of unbelievable. It seems like there's one in every county down here in the wintertime, and black-chinned. And I think there was a calliope hummingbird in the mountains that tried to winter here this year. But that's actually a really good tip, because at some point, it's not unheard of. I could come across a hummingbird in the winter and not know that fact about the wing buzz, but that could actually be a really good field mark to figure out, okay, are we talking about a late ruby-throated, or is this a really cool, rare black-chinned hummingbird?
Yeah, it might clue you in. I mean, at least clue you in that you want to get a better look, or, try to get a closer look at the wingtip pattern or other field marks. So that was really fun. And another thing that was so cool, cave swallow, this for northerners, we don't see them, but if they are around, it tends to be like a November vagrant surprise kind of event for us. Well, they have really expanded into like central and northern Texas in the last 20 years, and they're just common. So they were like in Austin, they were literally nesting in the entryways of people's houses, where it's hard to describe, but it's like a 30-foot high enclosed tower with front walls and side walls and back walls. The only entrance is the human door at the front bottom, right? So the bird, to get up in there where it wants to nest, way up in the corner, has to fly down to the human level, enter the door, and then go all the way up 30 feet up in the interior of this column. And that's what they're doing. So it's right in people's entryways. They're like pooping on everybody's head. They're, when they try to walk through they're getting annoyed. Like they're like, it's a pest bird. They're like, what kind of bird is this? They're so annoying. And I'm like, they're cave swallows. Those can't be annoying. This is like one of the coolest swallows we have,
Yeah. Yeah. And they create some of the coolest nests too. A lot of the swallows make really cool, almost like artistic looking, creative adobe structures up in the like rafters of barns and under bridges. And it's really cool. It's hard to believe that a bird could make something like that. Although it's not nearly the coolest bird nest. We could do a whole episode on crazy bird nests.
I like that idea. Let's definitely do that. So one of the things about their nest that's very interesting, they're actually, the bird looks like a cliff swallow. It's very, very similar to a cliff swallow. They have the orange rump patch. They both affix mud up into the kind of upper reaches of like an overhang like this. They'll kind of place it up there. But whereas the cliff swallow does the round gourds with an opening that faces down, like a hole, the cave swallow just makes a muddy platform, just like barn swallows nest. So they look like a cliff swallow, but they nest like a barn swallow.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and apparently they have hybridized at times too.
Cliff swallow and cave swallow have hybridized.
Yeah, I believe they have.
I believe it. They do look very similar. They look much more similar to each other than they do to either of them look to barn swallow for sure.
Yeah. I'm having trouble finding a photo here. Give me a second. This will be worth it because there's got to be nest photos in here.
Oh yeah. I was actually at a work site the other day and we were checking out this river that this power line went over, and there was a bridge, and we were walking under the bridge, and all under the bridge it was just little I assume they were cliff swallow nests because they were the ones that were like little balls with just a little hole in them. And the people were like, they know that I'm into birds now. They're like, well, what is that? Is that from a bird? And I'm like, it sure is. It's from a cliff swallow, and they're actually really cool and one of the more difficult swallows to see around here.
Love it. Yeah. So here's the nesting platform, and it's kind of like they're trying to make the gourd of cliff swallow, but they just don't wall off the top half of it. That's basically it's like it ends up just being like a platform. So very similar. And it was interesting too, Will. The ones at my relative's house in Austin had begun building it, but they seemed like they were not. I was there for like a week and they made no progress on it. They had just begun like the outline of the foundation of this platform. But you know how cave swallows seem like they get it done within 2 or 3 days? When they like when a cliff swallow up here is ready to go, I mean, it just does nothing but build that nest. And I feel like these cave swallows were just taking their good old time. It was interesting.
Yeah, you gotta wonder if they're not so fond of having to go by where people are coming in and out over and over and over again. If they find that a little bit, are my chicks gonna be safe here? I don't know. These birds seem utterly so well adapted to live in a human landscape. You know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It could be that. Though I have to say they didn't seem very bothered by people. I mean, it was almost the other way around. They're so habituated. I got the sense that maybe they just thought the weather was a little bit variable yet, or that the season is going to be so long because it's so hot down there. I mean, it's already 90 degrees many of the days now, that they're just not in a rush, is what it seemed like. But very, very interesting. It was really, really fun. Lesser goldfinches are around in the yards, at the feeders. Every patch of habitat has chipping sparrows and white-throated sparrows in it. Whereas up north, you're lacking a lot of that stuff. So all in all, a really, really great time. We also, I was going to tell you, we did 2 migration watches, and I wish you could have been there. You would have had such a great time with a great friend of mine, Aaron Boone in San Antonio, who has really pioneered migration watching around the edges of San Antonio, where they have these kind of that are these risen plateaus where you can get right up on the top of the ridge, and it's the edge of the Edwards Plateau. So the escarpment, the golden cheek warblers and black-capped vireos nest on the top of this thing, and San Antonio is right on the edge. So we had these 2 promontories where we got right up on the top right at dawn, and we didn't get great flights, but we got it's a little bit early. I think in another 2 to 4 weeks it'll be really, really hopping down there, but we got enough of a flavor of it that it really it's similar to the dunes, but it's pretty different too. There's more like gnatcatcher is a dominant species that comes flying over. There's things like black-bellied whistling duck flocks coming by. White-winged doves are constantly moving around, and a lot of that's not migration. It's just local birds kind of moving around. Yellow-rumped warblers. There was blackbird flocks even in San Antonio, which I found odd. That seems late, but thousands of mainly female red-winged blackbirds. And then the habitat is just full of like orange crown warblers and ruby crown kinglets, and things like cardinal. Blue jay was actually kind of uncommon. We didn't get many of them. So just fun, man. It was just a nice reprieve from the cold.
Yeah. Let me ask you this really quick. The older I get and the more birding I do and the more migration watching that I try to do, the more I start to realize how pivotally important large bodies of water are to getting a good flight. Do you agree with this? Where are the classic places where they just have fantastic raptor watching or migration watching that aren't around an ocean or a Great Lake or maybe the Salt Lake? I know that people try to do it in the Appalachians, but I haven't found that many like insane checklists compared to what they've got over near like Point Mouillet and Whitefish Point.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff Sky Haas has done in the North Shore of Lake Michigan.
No, I mean, it's a really good point. I think lakes clearly are one of the best concentrators, and like especially as you scale up to an ocean, it just amplifies the effect even more. That's why like the East Coast and like the Texas coast, places like that, it's just loaded because birds don't want to be in the water. But it's also other geographical features too. So like, mountain ridges in Montana, we would go to the Continental Divide, which is kind of the high point of that divides eastern Montana from western Montana, and it's a north-south facing ridge like this. So you can get right up on the top, and so the wind will kind of blow up off of the ridge top, and then the birds just know that they can glide right down it for free and migrate all the way south. So I would say ridge tops are probably one of the other really best ones other than water bodies. So places like the Goshoot Mountains in Nevada. I forget the name of the one in Montana that we did. Kind of between Helena and Missoula there on the divide. That was a really good one on the east front. Braddock Bay is water. That one's Lake Ontario in New York. But then of course Hawk Mountain, right, Pennsylvania. So and a lot of those Appalachian ridges are just incredible, and they'll get like golden eagle flights. So yeah, I think it can be a variety of things. Those are probably the two dominant ones, though. Otherwise, you're going to see hawks from anywhere, I would say, during migration. You're just going to see a smaller number in background noise if you're not at one of those pinch points.
Yeah. It is amazing, though. I wish if there's any kind of birding that I would tell like a beginning to intermediate birder to try out if they've never tried it out before it's migration watching. Because you hear about this, the symphony of migration where these birds come and these birds go and another species comes in at the tail end of that and they're always timed up well with another species. You hear about it and you can see it in the data and you can notice it going out every morning. But to actually go out and stand on a dune or on a mountain or somewhere near the lake or the ocean and watch flocks of red-winged blackbirds and see 5,000 red-winged blackbirds in a day, it's eye-opening, I think is the best way to say it. You're watching them do it. You're watching them do what they have been doing for tens of thousands of years in this country.
The way I've always thought about this, you're plugging into the universe in a very deep way. These animals, it's like a scavenger hunt for adults, but these animals were not put there by human beings. They were put there by the universe. So it really gives you like the excitement of like, you never know what you're going to find. But you're also in like almost a Zen state because you kind of become one with the movement of the universe, and I think that's probably why migration watching has become my favorite mode of birding in the last several years. It is just so fun to go to one location and you have such a sense of place and belonging there, and to watch these animals living their lives. Who comes through in February and March? It's the early stuff, right? And then you get to April and the warm fronts and more insectivorous birds. And then by the time May hits, it's just an insane, party. And then you get to June and it's all over. And every time you go out there's a little bit different flavor. I can't encourage people enough to bird a local patch and watch what happens throughout the changing seasons. It's so fun.
Yeah. Dude, I was thinking of this one story the whole time not the whole time. I was listening to you. I don't want to be disrespectful.
It's easy not to listen to me. I tend to ramble a bit.
No, I was just thinking about this day that we had at Miller Beach where this cold front was hitting around like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. So we got out there, and it was kind of balmy, and we're watching on the map this cold front working south and south and south, and all of a sudden the winds shift, it gets cold, and the bottom of the lake starts filling up with sternaterns. And before like an hour passed, we've got like nearly 1,000 common and Forster's terns milling around. We were getting Jaegers in that group. We had a Sabin skull and I think a kittiwake that day. And it's like, how could they be so perfectly synced up with one another? Because it's not that all these birds were in one flock. They were in multiple different smaller flocks all around the lake. And they were just like, oh, it is time to go. And all of a sudden, like clockwork, that's where they end up.
These animals are I know we've talked about this before, but birds are just intricately aware and intimately tied to changes in barometer, changes in temperature, especially changes in wind. And when a cold front hits in the fall and birds are getting ready, and the Zuganru is kicking in, the hormones are changing, they're ready to go. They know that cold front's coming. And when it finally hits, they all can move at one time. And that is exactly like the types of times when you want to be out there. They even have awareness that would blow your mind. I told you about the golden winged warbler example from April, probably about 10 years ago, that got published, where they had actual transmitters. Have you heard this?
No, hit me with it.
So, long story short, I'll keep it brief. They had transmitters on the backs of golden winged warblers, these little beautiful little songbirds that winter in like Costa Rica and breed in, say, Minnesota. Okay. These particular individuals breed in North Carolina, up in the mountains. Okay. And they made landfall in Alabama as they were coming up from, the tropics. And on whatever date, we'll just say it was April 17th. That's the day they hit the Gulf Coast. And then on April 22nd, they went to the exact territory where they breed, because they always go back to the same territory. On April 23rd, they left the North Carolina mountains and went back to the coast. And then a tornadic storm came through and created billions of dollars in damage. And this was 2 individuals, not just one. And after the storm had passed through, they flew back to North Carolina and went to the territory. So these birds for sure had some kind of knowledge of this crazy weather that was going to come through, and flew, whatever, is that 500 to 1,000 miles out of their way, both ways, in order to avoid it. I mean, that is some awareness. And how do they know that? Like, how could they know that?
We need to start marketing this as like the best weather prediction, and like I don't know, like if you want to avoid having multiple like casualties in some sort of terrible storm, you got to track more of these birds because they can predict it faster than humans can.
If you could tap into whatever clues they're using, that would definitely be marketable and valuable to people. No, a meteorologist could probably learn something from it.
Right. Hey, while we're here, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Cornell feeder and nest cams. Are you aware of these?
I am. It's been a hot minute since I've logged into them, but what a great resource.
Yeah, it's super cool. Let's just check this one out. They've got a nest cam inside of a nesting box for barred owls here. Let's see if he's in there right now. Oh, sure enough, or probably she.
We'll share the URL for this webpage in the comments and description.
For sure, absolutely. Look how cool that is.
Wow, look at that.
So this is just one of them. This is the barred owl. Let's check out the ospreys.
Hellgate is my old hunting grounds. That's Missoula, Montana, University of Montana. I used to spend 4 years of my life right there.
Is that right?
Yep, right there. I know the exact spot.
Looks like nobody's home.
Actually, they probably are not back in Missoula yet, because it's another level north and level intense, cold and so on. They're probably not back.
That's probably right.
Yeah.
Look at this, dude.
Oh, that's live. Look at that. Wow.
Yeah, so we're live watching a great horned owl. It's acting like it can hear us.
Wow.
I wonder where this nest box is.
Dude, can you imagine how long these birds sit there and they just have the ultimate patience to nurture those eggs and not be seen? It's breathtaking.
Yeah, it's amazing. Here's another thing about Texas. How much more abundant great horned owls are in the South than they are in Michigan. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah,
I feel like I came across almost every time I looked at what I thought was going to be a red-tailed hawk nest, I would put my binoculars up to it, and there'd be a great horned owl mama staring right back at me.
Oh, wow. I was in urban San Antonio and walked outside the house at night and heard one singing. I'm like, where is the habitat? There was no habitat there.
Yeah, they have to be more common. Oh, I looked at this like half an hour ago, and there were evening grosbeaks all over it.
And where is this one? Is that Algonquin?
That's Ontario. Yeah.
Wow.
So here's Panama. Let's see if there's any fruit eaters.
Gosh, they have videos all over the world. These live streams. Oh, look at that.
What do we got here? Any guesses?
Female euphonia of some species. Yeah, that's a euphonia.
Yeah, would it be yellow-throated there?
That's above my pay grade.
Those suckers are hard to identify too, especially the females.
Yes, they can be very hard. Although one of the things that's always funny whenever we go to the tropics, there only tends to be like maybe 2 or 3 species at any given place, even though the book might have like 18 euphonias in it. So once you get to your local site, it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's right. Dang, dude, we tuned in at the wrong time. I was on here like an hour ago, and all these feeders were like covered in birds.
That's
No,
funny.
it's fun though.
This is Sapsucker Woods. I know this by Cornell University, right at the actual lab of ornithology.
Yeah, it's actually a good birding spot.
Yeah, yeah, it's really good, and the facility there is phenomenal. If folks ever have the chance to go, I highly recommend that.
Albatrosses are such a cool species.
Where is this?
Look at this.
This is Royal Albatross, so it's in the southern hemisphere. Where is this?
It's in New Zealand, or it's from the New Zealand Department of Conservation.
Look at that, dude, on the island where they're nesting, like sitting with the lone chick, and oh man, that is cool.
It's so much cooler. I don't know why, but it's so much cooler than just watching it as if it were watching like a video of a nest. It's so much cooler watching it live because it's like, oh my gosh, I've like half seen this species now.
That is so cool. And the way that the parents are not there because these albatrosses, the parents will go out and find food, and they'll tell the chick like, just hold tight, we'll bring you food. And sometimes, do you know this? It takes them like 3 days to get back because they'll go. Laysan albatrosses will go 1,500 miles round trip just to get one crop full of fish for the baby. So they'll come back after 3 days, give it a bunch of fish, and then leave.
Yeah.
You know, incredible journeys that these things are doing. But I did not know they had live streams. And is it light in New Zealand right now at 5 p.m. Eastern time? Does that sound right? It must be early morning, right?
Must be, yeah. But the sun must have just come up over there.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
dude. The other thing,
spectacular.
seabirds are so cool too. I was just reading that the wandering albatross, I guess they just split that species out, but whatever that group is called now, the young ones will take a year to mature after they fledge, and they often will literally take up off out of that nest and literally never land except for in the water to get food
Yeah.
for 2 years.
Yeah.
And they literally circumnavigate Antarctica, which is basically circumnavigating the world. They can do that 2 to 3 times in a 24-month period. Think about how many miles that is. Tens of thousands of miles where they don't even see land.
It's hard for us to fathom as human beings, but when the fact that birds evolved the ability to fly opened up so many niches across the world that were just completely untapped, and they own them. That's their place. And like the oceans, I think a lot of people don't even realize. I think, well, the oceans don't have birds, right? Why would they? That's what would you eat? Where would you take a break? Where would you drop your eggs? It's wrong. The oceans are full of birds, especially the cold water zones. There's fewer of them in the warm water zones just because there isn't much food. But that was an education. Getting out on cruise ships and boats that are heading way offshore, especially where there's cold water. And there are, like, I was in San Francisco Bay, and there was literally millions of shearwaters, and you could see them from shore too, like black-vented shearwaters and sooty shearwaters and stuff like that. Yeah, birds are incredible, man.
Yeah. What's the number one, or what's like posited as the number one most numerous bird in the world?
Dovekey?
You know,
Is that
the
right?
dovekey. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I knew what the population
with
was.
that intro.
Yeah, let's pull it up. This is one of the all-time coolest birds, in my opinion. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, it's definitely up there. It's definitely up there. They, in addition to being like the size of like a house sparrow, this little tiny thing, they are extremely cold weather adapted. So it literally is like 6 or 7 inches long, like just like a house sparrow. But it's this abundant seabird. It's not even in Newfoundland in the summertime. They're further up north in like Labrador and up in the high Arctic, and they only come down to Newfoundland in the Maritimes in like late fall, like wintertime and so on. But incredibly industrious, living their whole winter offshore in the open ocean and just doing just fine. It's like the weather just doesn't even hardly seem to impact.
And I'm gonna look it up right now.
Have you seen one of these, Will?
Oh no, I've never seen a dovekey. I've done a lot of lake watching.
That makes 2 of us, and it's
Yeah.
definitely on my list. Like, we need to take a trip to like Massachusetts in late November one of these years and just nail it once and for all. Thick
Well,
billed murre.
there's 17 million of them, so we should probably have a good shot.
Oh wow, isn't that something? Like it can be kind of like, I don't think of this as a real common bird or easy one to see, but yeah, that's very, very abundant.
It's because their breeding habitat is so unaffected by human encroachment. We don't do anything up there. We don't have any real use for that land, so they've got unlimited access to breeding. Whereas a lot of the birds that are in more trouble are trying to nest in grasslands, which make for perfect agriculture. And we don't need to get all into that again.
Yeah. It also just it exemplifies how, these seabirds, and not just dovekies, but like shearwaters and albatrosses, they have located this unique niche of nesting on islands and on sheer cliff faces, like on remote atolls and so on, where there's no predators. Like it doesn't even have to be a cliff. Like Laysan albatross will nest on the beaches of the Hawaiian Islands and out in the far northwestern chain of the Hawaiian Islands, where it's just pure sand, but there's no rats on those islands. So you can just lay your eggs and have thousands of chicks sitting there for months on end, and there's nothing that will come by and eat them.
Yeah. And that is one of the largest pressures on these birds in terms of their population decline, is they're used to being on these islands that basically had no mammals on them, including little nest predators like rats and marmots or whatever. And the problem now becomes when these ships go there to set up military bases, well, the military bases don't pose really any issues for these species in the long run. What poses issues for these species is constant nest failure because of these rats that are now infesting the islands, or house cats.
Oh yeah,
domestic cats are also a real problem.
Cats, rats, anything that can eat and kill the chicks, and that's exactly what they do. They will eat them alive. They'll even eat shearwater babies out of burrows. There's conservation programs in Hawaii that are all about this, and they've really humanized. These chicks have names, and like the public knows it and gets invested in individual birds and stuff. Have a look at this video. Actually, this is Laysan albatrosses in Kauai at one of the compounds where there are regular monitors. You can see the band on that bird's leg, in fact. And so they'll sit there with the chicks when the adults are out catching food and stuff, and help take care of them. And if you do that, plus you have to make sure that the commercial fisheries out in the open ocean is not killing these birds, because they either have hooks that are accessible from the surface, like the bird will dive after the bait and it'll get its beak hooked and then it drowns. And then the netting too. So as long as the net and the bait sinks quickly and is weighted properly, then the birds can't get down to it, and then everything's fine.
Yeah.
But we know the formula. We know the formula to conserve birds. It just is, do we have the will to do it, and to find the funding and the public support? We need the people who are listening to this podcast to jump on board with this, provide the money support, provide the political support. And when folks do that, birds thrive. And when birds thrive, people thrive.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my life career in a nutshell right there.
Yeah. The State of the Birds came out about this time last year, maybe, talking about what groups of birds are in the most precipitous decline and which ones have actually rebounded in the last 20, 30 years. And the birds that are actually doing better than they were in the late 90s are waterfowl. Waterfowl are doing well because it's a very simple formula. We need more wintering habitat, we need more migration habitat, and we need more breeding habitat. So if we notice that one of those three things is really hurting, what we're going to do is we're going to protect those habitats and restore those habitats to the best of our abilities. Yeah. And that's what U.S. Fish and Wildlife has been doing. It's what Ducks Unlimited has been doing. It's what organizations like Audubon, like these are major focuses. And it's like, we're going to put our resources to this, and we're going to get results. Because at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what kind of resources do these birds have access to,
Yeah, no, I can't agree more. Ducks Unlimited, I actually worked with several of their biologists for several years at Michigan DNR, and you see the data firsthand. They're banding the animals, they're monitoring the productivity out in the plains in North Dakota and Saskatchewan. And then they're changing the harvest levels each fall to suit. So if canvasbacks have a down year, the canvasback bag limit can go down to 0 because that's one of the rare species, right? They can't take any pressure that winter, so nobody hunts them. And then once they come back up, and the other animals that win are everything else that's using those marshes: the marsh wrens, the yellow-headed blackbirds, the black terns, all the non-game stuff too. So it's just win-win-win. So we just need people to hunt and buy those licenses. That funds all that work and funds our state DNRs and all the public lands that we have. Not all, but much of the public lands that we have. And we need people to be aware of these things, because we need to have public support at large. That really makes the difference politically about whether the funding is going to be there or not. If the constituents don't demand it, it may go away. And that's not going to work for wildlife. Will, I am realizing before we wrap today that we have not done our birds of the week yet. So,
all right,
what is your bird of the week?
Okay, so I was birding last weekend, I think Sunday, and we were trying to do a little migration watch from this spot on Lake Norman, which is a huge impoundment, Duke Energy impoundment in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. And we said,
Duke.
Yeah, shout out Duke. But we weren't having any luck where we were at, so we said, let's leave and go check this little mud flat. So we drove around to the other side of the lake, and there was a pectoral sandpiper poking around on the beach here. It was just that and a killdeer for the only shorebirds that were there. And I was like, oh, there's a peck here. And the guy I was with was like, what? Because apparently there's so little habitat for shorebirds in this county that pectoral sandpiper has not been seen in Mecklenburg County since spring of 2023. So it's been almost 2 years since this species has been seen in the county.
Wow.
And, coming from the Midwest, I wouldn't say that this is an insanely abundant bird, but if you're hitting your fluttles in the spring, you should be able to bump into a few of these.
Absolutely.
But that was fun for me because I haven't seen very many shorebirds at all since moving down here. So it was a good reminder that these things are still out there. Talking about birds, speaking of birds that have had pretty precipitous population declines, these shorebirds, these calidrous sandpipers have almost unilaterally declined very badly in the last 50, 100 years. Unfortunately, it's really fun to see them though.
That's a great bird. Why is this called pectoral? There's something to do with the pec, the chest, right?
Yeah, right. So they're sort of breeding plumage here. You don't see it a lot after they molt out of this, but they've got this beautiful flecking going down just below their breast and kind of into their belly. And I guess the person that named it thought that they should name it after the muscles that sit behind those these feathers here. So yeah, it's the pectoral sandpiper for its pectoral plumage.
Let me add a tab here. Might it perhaps be because of the chest of this bird, not just the plumage pattern on it, but whatever it's doing with the air sacs here to make it look like this?
Dude, I've never seen that before.
You wouldn't, because this is up in the breeding grounds in the high Arctic. They where they're courting and doing all the like courtship stuff around the nest. Isn't that crazy? Look at that.
What on earth? It's like flexing some muscles to push the feathers out just at the bottom.
I don't think it's muscles. I think this is the air sacs. It's got to be the air sacs. The muscles just aren't that big. And you can see it's kind of puffed up behind the neck too. So it's probably the I forget if it's the gular air sac or the pectoral air sac. I don't know why they're named pectoral. I always assumed it was because of the sharp line is the kind of field mark on the chest there that you identify them with, but maybe it's because of this other stuff too. I don't know. There's always an interesting backstory on that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Now,
all right, what's your bird of the week? Yeah.
Yes. For my bird of the week, I have to choose. It's almost a little bit too obvious of a choice, but I have to do it anyway. So I'm going to start with the video here because it's just such a fun, gorgeous bird. It's not just the rarity of this, right? It's the beauty of it and the experience of being able to find one and see one. So I'm going to play you a video here and we'll get to it. That is the golden-cheeked warbler, and that is probably maybe the the single most famous species that comes out of Texas. These things are gorgeous and really rare, and they nest only in the hill country, I believe. Isn't that right? They don't go to Oklahoma or anything, do they? Aren't they just?
They have a tiny breeding range. Yeah, kind of on the Edwards Plateau there, I think.
And here is my best one or two photos of them. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous bird, Will. It's kind of like a black-throated green, but a little bit on steroids. A really sharp pattern of like black in the back, just gorgeous yellow in the face with the stripe, and just really, really dapper. I've always loved birds that are colored largely black with a splash of color. Things like American redstart, and this. You don't think of warblers as being that way, but this kind of is. It's a very, very dark bird with the amazing pattern of yellow on the face. And I have one other photo. Let me show you this one.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, this is one little thing I didn't know about. I knew that they were black on the back, and kind of the black goes all the way down to the tail, but there's a little hint of like green and yellow in the upper rump area there.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of right in here. I don't know if you see my cursor.
Yeah.
But just very attractive little bird, and they're so rare. What are there, like a few thousand pairs of these, or something like 5,000 pairs? I don't have the exact number, but they're really genuinely rare. A lot of them are on private land, and they seem to love the live oaks, the tree that's so famous from the South. And it was 90 degrees out and blue dome, and you're sweating, and you feel like you're out in a wilderness area in the American West. So the experience as a whole was just really, really welcome after having spent 4 years in a prison in Michigan, imprisoned in my condo here.
They're kind of like they're kind of like the Kirtland's warblers of the South, in that their habitat specificity and their rarity and their range restriction. Maybe a little bit less extreme than the Kirtlands, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Kirtland's warbler. I agree with you completely. They are the one that just about went extinct, and they were down to 330 individuals in the whole world. So this one's not quite that bad, but still pretty bad. Yeah. So always a treat, man. It was great. I honestly wish you could have joined. I think we'd have had such a blast down there.
Yeah, I can't wait to get down there again. Well, all right. This has been a fun episode, dude. I always love getting on here and chopping it up about what we've been up to.
I've been looking so forward to talking about this. I'm just so pumped that we were able to do it. So
yeah,
let's keep it going.
next week's episode is going to be fun as well, because migration is heating up, and I'm going to be birding all weekend in North Carolina. The birdcast is looking fantastic, and we're getting a little bit of rain on Sunday, so I think we have potential for a little bit of maybe a little mini fallout. Push some birds down onto the ground so we can go and rack up some diversity. It's going to be great.
Love it. Yeah, we just need a little bit of south wind. I just had my first Phoebe today when I was out there. So definitely feeling like spring is in the air. Those temperatures are warming up, and I haven't looked at the winds yet. I haven't had time, but I would love to get to the dune this week. Really hoping that is able to happen. So I'll keep you in the loop, and we can redux that next week if it happens.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and drop some comments if you'd like for us to cover anything, any topics that you're curious about. We're your guys for that. So thanks for watching.
Peace out.